I waited 3 years for that second line to appear. 3 years of vitamins that made me nauseous, tracking apps that made me obsessive, and hope that felt more like punishment every time it slipped away. There was one miscarriage at 9 weeks, then another at 6, then what they call a missed abortion. That last one ended in the ER, surrounded by beeping monitors and silence that stretched way too long. The kind where no one says anything because they assume you already know. Michael and I got married when I was 29. It felt late, even then. I remember we said we wanted a few years to settle in before trying, buy a house, pay down the student loans, travel a little maybe, normal stuff. We did most of it. Our house is a 3-bed in South Lexington, tucked behind Southland Drive, with a backyard that floods every spring and neighbors who wave but never stop to talk. It's fine. It's livable. We even have a dishwasher. But settling in somehow became the whole story, not just the start of it. Every time I brought up trying again after the losses, Michael would nod and say something vague like, "Let's not stress about it," or "We'll get there." He never fought me on anything, but he never leaned in either. He'd show up to appointments, but he'd wait in the car. He'd hand me water after hormone injections, but his eyes stayed on the TV. Every act of support had this strange detachment, like he was just ticking boxes on a chore list. After the last failed pregnancy, he got even quieter. I would lie in bed next to him and listen to him scroll on his phone while I stared at the ceiling. We barely touched. Sometimes he would reach for me out of habit, but I could feel the pause in his fingers, like he had to remember what we were doing. I started wondering if maybe he was just trying not to hurt me more, but deep down I knew it wasn't that. It was disconnection. Cold, settled, practiced disconnection. And then, finally, a missed period. I didn't say anything at first. I waited. 7 days, then 9. I didn't want to ruin it by hoping. I peed on a stick alone in the kitchen at 6 in the morning while the coffee brewed behind me. The first test turned positive in under a minute. My hands shook so bad I dropped it. I took another, then another. Same result. 2 pink lines. The kind of lines you dream about. I sat on the floor, still in my oversized sleep shirt, surrounded by plastic wrappers and wet sticks. The sun was barely up. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast, even though I hadn't made any. I don't know how long I sat there. 10 minutes maybe more. I don't remember standing up. I just remember walking down the hallway, barefoot, with the first test in my hand. He was still half asleep. I nudged his shoulder, smiled, said his name. I said, "It's positive." He blinked. Not in shock. Just once. Like he was trying to clear a notification on his phone. He said, "Okay, hope you're sure," then turned over, reached for his phone on the nightstand, and opened TikTok. That was it. No questions, no smile, no finally or "I'm so happy for you." He didn't even ask if I felt okay. And I remember standing there in the bedroom doorway, holding that little test in my hand like it was a magic trick I'd just ruined by showing it to the wrong person. I'd imagined that moment 100 times, and it had never looked like that. So, yeah, that's how it started. That's the beginning of this story. I used to think the hardest part was getting pregnant. I kept telling myself it was shock, that maybe it just hadn't sunk in yet, or that he needed time. Not everyone reacts the same way, right? Some people cry, some freeze, some say the wrong thing and try to fix it later. But the days kept passing and nothing changed. He didn't bring it up once. At my first appointment, I told him the date and he just said, "Okay," like I'd asked him to grab milk on the way home. He didn't ask how long it would take or what they were checking. I went alone, sat in the waiting room with a bunch of nervous first-time moms, and scrolled through Pinterest boards about nursery colors while a girl across from me threw up into a plastic bag. I tried to talk about names that night. I brought up a list I'd had in my phone since forever, just casually, just to see. He shrugged. I mentioned maybe finding out the gender early. He said, "Whatever you want." I said something about maternity leave, and he literally changed the subject to a YouTube video he saw about solar panels. At work, I'm a pharmacy tech at the Baptist Health Outpatient Center. People were excited, genuinely. My manager gave me a longer lunch so I wouldn't get lightheaded. One of the nurses brought me her daughter's old baby shoes, tiny ones with little felt ears. I almost cried in the break room. I wanted to carry them in my bag just so I had something that felt real. At home, there was just silence. He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't touch my stomach. He didn't even ask if I wanted anything different for dinner. And it's not like I expected some movie moment with belly kisses and nursery blueprints, but I thought maybe something. A hand on my back, a weird joke, a moment of eye contact, anything. Instead, I felt like I was living parallel to him. Like I was in this alone and he was just waiting to catch up, if ever. So I started keeping a pregnancy journal. Not the cute kind with ribbons and ultrasound slots, just a lined notebook from the dollar store. I wrote how many times I threw up that week, when I felt dizzy, what foods I could tolerate. I kept trying to phrase things in we, like, we hit 10 weeks today. But it felt fake, like I was writing for someone who hadn't asked to be included. My mom called around week 11. When I told her how flat Michael was being, she said, "Honey, men bond later. Once they see the baby, they get it. It's biological." I bit my tongue. I didn't say what I wanted to say, that it didn't feel like delayed bonding. It felt like absence, like vacancy dressed up as patience. He started coming home later. He said it was a project at the office that they needed extra hands on, late logistics. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But he always had time to play Apex Legends or whatever the game of the month was. I'd hear him in the living room, headset on, talking to strangers, laughing louder than he'd laughed with me in weeks. At 13 weeks, I had my first ultrasound where you could really see the face. The tech turned the screen toward me and I swear I stopped breathing for a second. It had a little nose, a round forehead. It didn't look like a blob anymore. It looked like a person, like someone I already knew. I texted him the picture. Just a picture. No caption. No filter. Just, "Here. This is our baby." He responded with a thumbs up emoji. And I think that was the moment where something in me gave up trying to explain it. Because how do you explain the weight of a life to someone who won't even look up? I wore the baggy sweatshirt on purpose. Not because I was trying to hide anything, but because I didn't want it to be a thing. It was Sunday, and we were at Amber's place, his older sister, for family dinner. She makes these weirdly stiff casseroles and buys bottled tea like it's a personality trait. I'd been dreading the evening all day. My belly had started to show just a little, mostly in the mornings, and I wasn't ready to have it noticed, or commented on, or turned into a group activity. Amber took one look at me and went, "Oh, is that a bump already?" Like it was some breach of etiquette, or like I was being overly dramatic about my own uterus. I smiled and said, "Almost 4 months," trying to sound neutral, like someone reporting the weather. Nobody said congratulations. Nobody smiled. Back. Michael was already filling his plate, and his mom was talking about the neighbor's dog again. It was like I'd mentioned a mole I was getting removed. Medical, mildly gross, not to be discussed over dinner. The conversation shifted to their upcoming trip to Gatlinburg. Who could drive? Who was booking the Airbnb? Amber turned to us and said, "Well, I guess you two aren't going anywhere for a while, huh?" And Michael actually laughed and said, "Or maybe we will if it doesn't work out." Then he grinned, like it was some edgy joke, like he was the only one in the room smart enough to make light of miscarriage. Everyone laughed, even his mom. I didn't. After dinner in the car, I said, "What was that?" And he rolled his eyes and said, "God, you're so sensitive lately. People joke. It's not that deep. Relax." But it was that deep. And it wasn't hormones. It was the way he didn't even flinch saying it. Like the worst possible outcome wasn't even tragic, just inconvenient. Like the idea of losing. This baby, my baby, was material for dinner banter. I asked him, "Do you even want this child?" And he shrugged, then said, "You're the one who wanted it. Not we, not us, not even you and the baby. Just you." Like I'd placed an Amazon order, and now he had to sign for the package. That night, I slept in the guest room. I told him it was because I couldn't get comfortable, the mattress, the temperature, whatever. But that was a lie. It was the cold. Not physical, but the kind you feel when someone you love acts like a stranger at your most vulnerable moment. That kind of chill doesn't let you sleep next to them. That kind of chill makes you build walls in your own house. I started dreaming weird things. The kind of dreams that feel sticky even after you wake up. In one of them, I heard a voice calling me. Soft at first, then louder. I turned around, expecting to see a child, but the voice was too deep. Adult. Male. Still, it kept saying, "Mom? Mom?" Like it needed me, like it was trapped. I woke up sweating. Maybe it's just the anxiety. Or maybe, deep down, I already knew. This wasn't going to be the story I'd hoped for. Update: it had been 2 weeks since I left the house. The weather in Lexington had shifted, that warm edge of summer giving way to the dull gold of early fall, and everything outside smelled like dry leaves and gasoline. I was staying at Beth's, technically in the laundry room, since her guest room was filled with storage bins and her boyfriend worked nights. But she'd made it feel like more. She'd put a lamp on the dryer and gave me the softest quilt she owned, and when I first came in that night, she didn't ask anything. She just opened the door, nodded once, and moved the drying rack out of the way. But this part isn't about Beth. That night, 2 weeks ago, was pizza night. We'd been keeping it simple. Grocery store meals, paper plates, the kind of low-energy domesticity you don't notice until it's gone. I'd told him earlier that day, before the sharp thing that cut everything open, that I'd signed up for a birth class. Just a local session at the Baptist Health Center, something to help me feel more prepared. I remember I said it like it was good news, because back then I still thought maybe this was salvageable. Maybe I could bring him into it, one small step at a time. He was cutting the pizza. That's what he was doing when it happened. One of those cardboard-bottomed frozen kinds with pepperoni that curls like tiny hats. He looked up, knife still in hand, and snorted. "You still think this is real?" I blinked. I asked what he meant. He wiped his hands on a napkin and shrugged, like it was a nothing comment. Like it wasn't something that would break something. Forever. "I'm just saying. I'm not totally sure it's mine." There was this sound in my ears. Not like ringing, more like silence that had weight. I said his name. I said, "We live together. You've been there. What are you talking about?" He laughed. Actually laughed, not a full one. More like a short breath through his nose, but that's what did it. "You're always gone," he said. "You're always at the doctor or with your friends or at work." And yeah, I didn't ask for this. So if it's not mine, maybe that's a blessing. That word. Blessing. I was holding a fork. I don't even remember bringing it to the table, but I was holding it so tight it left a dent in my palm for an hour. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He said it like he was ordering a side dish he didn't really care about. And then he stood up, stepped around me, and went into the bedroom. Like the conversation hadn't just dropped a crater into the middle of our life. I stayed in the kitchen. For a long time. The pizza got cold. I think the ceiling fan stopped spinning at some point. I couldn't move. And then, without deciding, I got up, went to the bedroom, took my go bag from the closet, the one I'd packed for the hospital someday, and I filled it with the things I knew I needed. Toothbrush, charger, prenatal vitamins. A copy of my birth plan, 3 pairs of socks. I texted Beth before I left. I just said, "Can I come over?" She wrote back, "Already cleared the couch." When I showed up, she opened the door in pajama pants, moved the laundry basket aside, and handed me a mug of hot cocoa like it was normal. Like this wasn't a collapse, and maybe that's what I needed most. The next morning, I got a message. Not from him. From his mom. Just one line. "So you're really going to ruin everything?" No question mark, just a period. It took me a few days to admit I wasn't going back. Not to the house, not to Michael, not to any version of what used to be. I started working part-time for a local accounting firm that let me handle remote invoices and light payroll work from Beth's kitchen table, which was almost always sticky from juice or cereal or something her niece had left behind. The setup was basic. My laptop, a notepad, and an old coaster that left cork bits on my palm. But it was mine. For the first time in months, I felt like I had a space that didn't belong to someone else. Beth was a quiet presence, the kind I didn't realize I needed. She'd ask if I wanted anything from Target, text from the driveway to help carry groceries, and wait outside the OB office while I had my appointments. She didn't push, she didn't pry, just existed nearby like a buffer between me and the last few years of my life. Michael never texted, not once, no calls, no questions, just silence, like I'd evaporated. But his sister, Amber, didn't keep quiet. One night, I was scrolling Instagram trying to distract myself from the weird back pain I'd started getting when I saw her story. A picture of a mocktail glass and a caption that said, "Some people treat pregnancy like a personality. Chill." No tags, no names, but I knew. And I felt something rise in me that I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Not fear, not guilt, anger. Real, bracing, stabilizing anger. It sat behind my ribs like steel. I clicked over to my files and typed out an email request to a family lawyer I'd seen recommended on a local forum, just to know what my options were. After that, I made a list. Diapers, onesies, baby shampoo, a secondhand crib if I could find one. I went online and started a registry not to share, but to track what I could afford and what could wait. I told myself, I am going to do this with or without him. A few days later, a package arrived. It was from Morgan, a woman I used to work with at the pharmacy. I hadn't told her much, just that I was expecting and taking time off. But somehow she knew enough to send a box full of tiny clothes, pacifiers, and a handwritten note. "You're going to be such a good mom." I cried. I really cried. Not like those choked up moments when you bite your lip and pretend you're just tired. I sobbed. Quietly, sitting on the floor, arms wrapped around the box like it was a lifeline. That same week, I had an ultrasound. The tech smiled and said, "She's strong, really active today." I remember that moment clearly, not just because of the heartbeat on the monitor, but because it was the first time I smiled without pretending. That night, when I got back to Beth's, there was something on the front doormat, a small brown box, no label, no return address. I picked it up carefully, brought it inside, and opened it on the counter. Inside was a soft zip-up onesie, pale gray with tiny stars on the sleeves, and a printed photo of an ultrasound. But the name, the date, the hospital logo, they'd all been blacked out with marker. I stared at it for maybe 10 minutes. I didn't cry this time. I just closed the box and put it on the highest shelf in Beth's hallway closet, the one she never used. I didn't need to know who sent it. I already did. Then I went into the kitchen, tied my hair back, and started a soup recipe I hadn't made in years. My mom used to cook it when someone in the family got sick. Something with carrots, chicken, rice, and too much garlic. But this time it wasn't for anyone else, it was for me. And for her, for us. It started the way people always say it doesn't. No drama, no yelling, no movie-like water breaking on the kitchen floor. Just a quiet cramp around 3 a.m., dull but deep, like something unfolding from the inside out. I waited 10 minutes, then another 5. Then I called Beth from the bathroom, still whispering, like I didn't want to wake up the house even though we were the only ones there. She picked up on the second ring, said, "I'll be there in 5, and she was. 6, if we're counting the red light on Main. We didn't speak in the car. The streets were empty, the kind of empty that only happens in small cities at night, where every light feels like it's waiting for permission to change. My breath was loud in my ears. I remember gripping the door handle not from pain, but just to feel something solid. Beth looked over once, didn't say a word, just nodded, and somehow that was enough. At the hospital, it moved fast. Not dangerously fast, just efficient. Like my body had been waiting for this moment and wasn't interested in second-guessing it. I barely noticed the changing of nurses, the shuffle of charts, the rustle of paper wristbands and IV bags. One of the nurses, tall, calm, hair in a low braid, held my hand through the worst of it and leaned in at one point to whisper, "You're not alone. I promise. "You are not alone." And that's when I cried. Not from pain, but because I believed her. The baby didn't scream when she came. That's the part I didn't expect. It wasn't silence either. It was this low, breathy moan, like she was arriving from somewhere far away and still adjusting to the light. They put her on my chest, and her skin was warm and sticky, and I remember thinking, she's real. She's not the idea of a child or a prayer on a test stick or a fight in a kitchen. She's here. She's mine. 2 days later, I got a text. Just a line from Michael. "I want to see her, please." I didn't answer. 7 days after that, he posted a photo. Not of her, of course. He didn't have one. Just a stock image of a baby foot and a caption. "Welcome to the world, little one. Even if they don't understand us, we're still family." The audacity of it made my stomach twist. Within an hour, I was getting DMs. Old classmates, his cousin, even someone from church. "He has a right to know her. You're hurting the child. Don't let your anger ruin what's sacred." Sacred? These people didn't even know what room I gave birth in. They didn't know how many hours I labored without his name on the emergency contact list. They didn't know the sound she made when she opened her eyes. So I opened a new folder on my laptop. I named it something simple, for her. One day. Inside it, I dropped everything I'd saved. Screenshots, voice memos, appointment receipts, the scan from 13 weeks when he replied with just a thumbs-up emoji. I didn't organize it neatly. I just wanted it to exist. I needed there to be proof, not for court, not for revenge, but so that if she ever asks, one day, when she's old enough and brave enough, I can show her that she was not abandoned. She was protected, and maybe I'll never need to open that folder again. Maybe she'll never ask. Maybe she'll just know. Tonight, I held her while the house was quiet. The laundry hummed in the other room, and the soup I made for dinner, the one Mom used to make when I was sick, was still warm on the stove. Her fingers curled around mine, tiny and insistent, and I realized I hadn't thought about him all day, not once. I looked down at her and said it out loud, not because she'd understand, but because I needed to hear it in the air. "You're mine, and you never have to love anyone who hurt you, not even if they share your blood." And with that, I exhaled, because now she was safe, and so was I.